And we have right here the categories of police operation. So as part of the PNP, your job is not just about maintenance of peace and order. There are diverse function being a police officer. You can be put in the public safety operations, law enforcement, internal security, special police operation, intelligence, investigation, and scene of a crime operations. And what are the basic requirements in a police operation? Well, for police operations like arrest, search and seizure, checkpoint, roadblocks, demolition, and civil disturbance management, it shall be done as follows. So it should be with a marked police vehicle. We should visibly see, recognize that it is coming from the PNP unit, and it must be led by police commissioned officers. So that's police lieutenant and up, rank of police lieutenant and up, and also with personnel in prescribed police uniform or attire. So this is the general rule whenever a police would have an operation. And what should police officers use during actual operations? So during police intervention operations, the team leader shall use peaceful means. So you could use megaphones or any other similar instruments to warn or influence the use of megaphones or any other similar instruments to warn or influence the offender or suspect to stop and or peacefully give up. And are warning shots prohibited? Yes. General rule, you cannot use warning shots. The police shall not use warning shots during police intervention operations. And use of force during police operation. What is the mandate given to the PNP regarding that? So, as a police officer, you have to take note that when you're effecting an arrest, you should not use excessive force. That is strictly prohibited. And when it comes to the issuance of verbal warning, as a police officer, you must first use or issue a verbal warning before you could use force against the offender. If there is a non-issuance of verbal warning, so when it comes to non-issuance of verbal warning when excusable, the failure to issue a verbal warning, it's only excusable when your life as a police officer is in threat or property is already imminent and there is no other option but to use force to subdue the offender. So that's only the time wherein you cannot use that verbal warning. And we have here the application of necessary and reasonable force. So as what I've said, as a police officer, when you're effecting arrest, search, and seizure, you cannot really use excessive force. The force that you can apply is only necessary and reasonable force. And there are some factors to consider in the reasonableness of the force employed. A police officer, however, is not required to afford offenders attacking him the opportunity for a fair or equal struggle. And the responsibility of the police officer in charge of the operation shall at all times exercise control over all police personnel in the area of operation and shall exhaust all possible means to apply necessary and reasonable force to protect lives and properties during armed confrontation. Regarding the use of firearm during police operation, police officer must take note that they can use it, or the use of firearm is justified only if the offender poses an imminent danger of causing death or injury to the police officer or other persons. And the use of firearm is justified under the doctrines of self-defense, defense of a relative, and defense of a stranger. And however, one who resorts to self-defense must face a real threat on his or her life, and the peril sought to be avoided must be actual. And the police shall not use warning shots during police operation, except when the police officer is outnumbered and overpowered, and his or her life and limb is in imminent danger. And also, when it comes to the rules and firing at moving vehicles, that is prohibited. A moving vehicle and its occupants shall not be fired upon except when its occupants pose imminent danger of causing death or injury to the police officer or any other person, that the use of firearm does not create any danger to the public and outweighs the likely benefits of its non-use. And in firing at a moving vehicle, the following parameters should be considered. First is, what's the intent of the suspect to harm the police officer or other persons? Next, you have to check the capability of the suspects to harm with certainty the police officer or other persons. And the last one is to check the accessibility or the proximity of the police from of the suspect from the police and the other persons. When it comes to the filing of an incident report after the use of firearm, a police officer who fires. So if police officer would fire his firearm during confrontation, during police operation with an offender or offenders, he or she must submit an incident report outlining the circumstances, situation necessitating the use of his or her firearm. And when it comes to the conduct of patrol operations, here are the things a police officer must do. There should be briefing before and debriefing after patrol operations. Perform firearm and equipment check prior to dispatch. Observe precautionary measures and personnel safety while on patrol. And also plan out patrol routes based on prevailing crime trends and patterns. Also, there must be observance of defensive driving and follow traffic rules and regulations. You have to also establish good rapport with people on your beat and be familiar with all the people in the community. Patrol members must always be on the lookout for indications of vices and other illegal activities on their beat. And also, patrol members must be knowledgeable of all conditions, events, and details on their beat. Be observant of people, places, situations, or conditions, and develop an inquisitive attitude, especially if the subject appears to be slightly out of the ordinary. And also, you have to keep under close observation actions of juveniles, troublemakers, and so on. And when requiring proof of identification from any person, let him or her hand it over to you. And patrol members must inform Tactical Operations Center before responding to any incident. And when it comes to the duties of patrol officer, they must attend the roll call formation before his or her tour of duty for briefing purposes. Patrol the assigned bits, observe and check suspicious people, structures, buildings. You have also to monitor public gatherings in order to prevent disorders. You have to inspect or conduct surveillance in various business establishments. You have to check for any suspicious vehicle, whether it's private, public, or commercial delivery vehicles. And you also have to report occurrences and conditions which relate to crime. And also, you have to gather and note down the patrol officer's logbook, all available data as to the nature of the calls, date, time, name of the caller. It's for documentation and records purposes. A responding officer shall validate first before responding to calls for police assistance. The manner of approach will be dependent on the nature of the call, either with haste, secrecy, or with or without flashing lights and sirens. You have also to consider the pertinent factors like the time, traffic conditions, the possibility of greater damage, and the neighborhood characters. And whenever practicable and available, you have to use and activate the PWC and comply with the guidelines and policies on the use thereof. And also, you have to stop the patrol car some distance from the scene. Approach the scene on foot in complete silence and exercise extreme caution. Immediately attend to the injured unless the other members of the patrol are in imminent danger. You have to focus all efforts to arrest criminals. However, priority shall be given to aiding the injured. Determine the crime committed. Identify, question briefly the victim, complaint, and possible witnesses at the scene. If a suspect or criminals have fled the scene before the arrival of the patrol team, you have to interview witnesses. When responding to street fights or brawls, you may call for backup before intervening. It's very important that you should really call for backup. It's also for your protection. You have to treat all calls for police assistance properly, including complaints of nuisances caused by excessive sound, odor, smoke, blinding light, among others. And we're responding to calls for police assistance due to suspected explosive device. Never attempt to handle, move, or lift. What you should do as a patrol officer, is to contact the TOC and request for explosive ordnance disposal team. And when responding to calls from beer houses, KTV bars, or any other similar establishment, you have to ensure that all lights are switched on. And when responding to requests for police assistance involving domestic violence, dispute between neighbors, landlords, seek the presence of barangay officials and DSWD, as the case may be. When responding to crime incidents involving women, either as a victim or suspect, the presence of a female police officer is necessary. And if you're responding to highly infectious diseases, you have to immediately inform the barangay concerned at the station, TOC for the observance of a health standard protocol. And if it's a cybercrime issue, you have to secure and preserve the evidence and immediately seek assistance from cybercrime investigators. And when responding to a hostage-taking situation, as a police officer, your job is to secure the scene, establish perimeter security, and inform Tactical Operations Center, because we have a separate unit who handles this specific hostage-taking situation. And for a spot check and accosting, the police officer may stop an individual for the purpose of conducting a spot check when reasonable suspicion exists. So mere suspicion is not allowed when it comes to spot check. So such facts include but are not limited to the following. You have to check the appearance or demeanor of the individual. The actions of the individual suggest that he is engaged in a criminal activity, or if there is questionable presence of the individual in the area. Also, if the subject is carrying a suspicious object, you can conduct spot check. If the suspect's clothing bulges in a manner that suggests he's carrying a weapon, you can go ahead and try to search for that person. The suspect has been found in time and place proximate to an alleged crime. The police officer has knowledge of the suspect's prior criminal record or involvement in criminal activity, or the individual flees at the sight of a police officer. And body frisking or pat-down search, it's a type of search wherein a police officer has the right to perform body frisking if the person has been stopped with genuine reason to believe that he or she carries weapons and poses a threat to the police officer or another person's safety. So body frisking, spot check, you do not need a search warrant for this. You may not go to the judge anymore to secure a search warrant when you're effecting this type of searches. And we have here some circumstances which may justify body frisking. Visual indications suggesting that the person is carrying a firearm. So if you have a reasonable suspicion or genuine reason that a person might carry a deadly weapon, then you can go ahead and search that person. You can conduct that body frisking. If the type of crime believed to have been committed by the person, particularly crimes of violence, where the threat of use or use of deadly weapon is involved, you can do the pat-down search right away without securing a search warrant or warrant of arrest. And if the demeanor of the person is threatening, you can also do the body frisking. And also, when approaching the person, the police officer shall clearly identify himself or herself and present his or her identification card. So whenever you do a spot checking, you really have to show the person your identity. Police officers shall be courteous at all times, but remain cautious and vigilant. And before approaching more than one person, police officer should determine whether the circumstances warrant a request for backup, or whether a stopping should be delayed until such backup arrives. So, as a police officer, you must be cautious if you are suspecting more than one offender, or let's say more than one person. Police officers shall confine their questions in relation to the grounds for stopping the person. In no instance shall a police officer stop a person longer than the period reason necessary. Police officers are not required to inform the person of his or her rights under the Miranda warning, unless the person is placed under arrest. Since you're just searching a person because you have this reasonable suspicion, so there's no need for you to inform that person about Miranda warning, anti-torture law. And for body frisking, if you have a genuine reason, then it shall be done with due caution, restraint, and sensitivity in the following manner. So whenever you do the body frisking, it shall be done by at least two police officers, one to do the search while the other provides security. And it should be done in a standing position with hands raised. The police officers are permitted to feel the outer clothing of the person, and police officers shall not place their hands inside the pockets of the clothing unless they feel that there is an object that could probably be a weapon. So, pat down search is it's more of like checking the external clothing of a person. And if after stopping or body frisking, the police officer finds no basis for making an arrest, he or she should put it on record in his or her patrol notebook. And if he or she finds ground for a valid warrantless arrest, then arrest shall be made. So what's important in here that whenever you try to do spot check, pat down search, you really have to record it on your tickler. And these are some other role, or these are the role of other law enforcement agency in our CJS. And we have right here the National Bureau of Investigation. Its former name is Bureau of Investigation. So this is created under RA 157 and it came into existence on June 19, 1947. So this is the investigative arm of the Department of Justice and it handles sensational cases. So the functions and powers of the NBI is more on undertaking investigation and detection of crimes and offenses, primarily that are sensational in nature. They issue subpoena for the appearance of any person for investigation or production of documents through its officers from the ranks of regional director to director. They act as a national clearinghouse of criminal records and other related information for the benefit of the government, and they render technical assistance to government agencies and instrumentalities when so requested. They also extend assistance in cases involving extradition when requested by the DOJ. And also, the National Bureau of Investigation, they have established an academy which shall be responsible for the recruitment, training, and development of all NBI agents. They also maintain a forensic and scientific research center, which shall serve as the primary center for forensic and scientific researches. And also they establish and maintain a cyber investigation and assessment center, which shall serve as the service center for computer information technologies, data on cybercrime cases, computer intrusion, threats, and other related crime activities. And also, they establish and maintain an integrated, comprehensive, and state-of-the-art network of equipment and facilities to be used by NBI in its criminal investigation, detection, evidence gathering. They also request assistance of the PNP, AFP, or any other agency of the government, including government-owned and or controlled corporation in its anti-crime drive. And they also conduct intelligence operations. And also, they enter into any contract or transaction for the acquisition, ownership, possession, administration, lease, disposition, or acceptance of real or personal property. They also establish the modern NBI Clearance and Identification Center, which contains all the derogatory and criminal records and civilian identification records. And they also maintain, for purposes of investigative and forensic requirements of NBI, relevant database such as ballistic records of firearms, and also they perform other functions as a president or the secretary may assign. And the NBI have the primary jurisdiction to undertake investigations in the following cases. So human trafficking cases in all airports in the Philippines, extrajudicial, extralegal killings committed by the state security forces, killings of justices and judges, violation of RA 10175 or the Cyber Crime Prevention Act, and cases referred by the Interagency Anti-Graft Coordinating Council. So those are taken over by the NBI. And we have right here the PDEA, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency. This is the implementing arm of the RA 9165. So it is created by virtue of the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, and this was created for the efficient and effective law enforcement of all the provisions on dangerous drugs and the precursors and essential chemicals provided in RA 9165. And we have the Dangerous Drugs Board. So if the PDEA is the implementing arm, then we have the DDB, who is the policy making body, or the policy making and strategy formulating body in the planning and formulation of policies and programs on drug prevention and control. And we have right here the Bureau of Customs, which is under the auspices of the Department of Finance, and it's mandated to implement effective revenue collection, prevent and suppress smuggling and entry of prohibited imported goods, supervise and control over the entrance and clearance of vessels and aircrafts, and engage in foreign commerce. So to summarize everything, PNP is under the supervision of the NAPOLCOM. The NBI is under the supervision of the Department of Justice. The PDEA is under the supervision of the Office of the President, and we have the Bureau of Customs, which is under the supervision of the Department of Finance. And these are the famous law enforcement agencies in the Philippines, but there is still a lot of law enforcement, like Department of Agriculture. We have Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So there are still a lot of law enforcement agencies, but these four are the famous ones, the famous law enforcement agency in the Philippines. And if you do have questions, just feel free to ask me whenever we have our face-to-face discussion.